Hello, everyone. This is the lecture on the introduction to the Cold War, and also we're going to cover the Korean conflict in this war. This lecture is it's just an introduction to an era that defines American history, all the way from the end of World War II to 1990, right? So just about 30 years ago was the end of the Cold War, which is an era of conflict, of social change, domestic change, and it defines the modern age of not only the world but of the United States. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to get started. Okay, so the Cold War goes from 1945 into 1990, and it's the United States versus the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics, which is the Soviet Union. So it's democracy versus capitalism, right? And this is a famous Rocky Balboa picture because he went up against the Russian boxer in the movie Rocky. So the United States and the USSR, this is the relationship during World War II. So in 1939, Stalin, who's the leader of the USSR, the Soviet Union, makes a deal with Hitler, which is the leader of Germany, obviously. In 1941, Hitler breaks this deal and attacks the Soviet Union. Stalin then changes the sides and fights with the Allies, the United States, the United Kingdom, and portions of France. So he's a reluctant ally. He's only allied with the Allies because Germany attacks him. If Germany had not attacked him, he probably would still have been in a agreement with Germany. So before the end of World War II, Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt met at Yalta to plan what would happen when the war ended, and they agreed on many points. The establishment of the United Nations, a division of Germany into 4 different zones, free elections allowed in all states of Eastern Europe, Russia's promise to join the war against Japan in the Pacific, and no agreement was reached on Poland. If you remember correctly, the Soviet Union and Germany both invaded Poland at the same time, kicking off World War II. People forget that. The Soviet Union wanted Poland just as bad as Germany because Poland, or Warsaw, the capital of Poland, the region there, used to be under Russian yoke or Russian control before the fall of the Russian monarchy in 1917. So yes, things are complicated, but so is history. So here we go. So the Cold War characteristics, political, strategic, and ideological struggle between the US and the USSR that spread throughout the global world. A struggle that contained everything short of war. It was a competing social and economic ideologies. So to promote, the post-World War II and Cold War goals for the U.S. is to promote open markets for the U.S. goods to prevent another depression, and to promote democracy throughout the globe. Promote democracy throughout the world, especially in Asia and Africa, and to stop the spread of communism. This is what we call the domino effect, which I'll cover a little bit later. This is the Cold War goals for the USSR, is to create a greater sense of security for itself. They lost tens of millions of people in World War II and Stalin's purges of political dissenters. So a fun little fact, Stalin was actually worse than Hitler when it comes to killing his own citizens. So it's pretty crazy. He feared a strong Germany, and he wanted to establish defensive borders around the USSR. And to encourage friendly governments on its borders and to spread communism around the world. So this right here becomes let me annotate. So I'm trying to annotate. This right here becomes what we call the Iron Curtain, which is established by British Prime Minister Winston Churchill in a speech that he gave in Kansas, ironically. And he said, from Stettin in the Baltic to the Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lie all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Western Europe: Warsaw, Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Budapest, Belgrade, I practiced this before, Bucharest, and Sofia. All of these famous cities and the populations around them lie in what I must call the Soviet sphere, and are all subject in one form or another, not only to Soviet influence, but to a very high and in some cases increasingly measure of control from Moscow. So the Truman Doctrine is established in 1947 for it's this idea of containing communism. So President Truman takes over the presidency after the death of President FDR. And Truman says, listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to establish a doctrine for the allies and the United Nations to follow. And it is to contain communism and to stop the spread of communist governments throughout the world. So the British helped the Greek government fight communist guerrillas in 1947, and they appealed to America to aid, and the response was the Truman Doctrine. America promised it would support free countries to help fight communism. Greece received large amounts of arms and supplies, and by 1949 they had defeated the communists. The Truman Doctrine was significant because it showed that America, the most powerful democratic country, was prepared to resist the spread of communism throughout the world. The Marshall Plan in 1947, United States Secretary of State George Marshall announced the Marshall Plan, and this was a massive economic aid plan for Europe to help recover from the damage caused by World War II. There's two motives to this. The first is to help Europe recover economically, would provide markets for American goods as benefiting American industry. And number two, a prosperous Europe would be better able to resist the spread of communism. This was probably the main motive of the Marshall Plan. So tons, millions of US dollars flood into Europe for the rebuilding of infrastructure, homes, neighborhoods, farming equipment, all of this stuff, just to stop the spread of communism, to stop the yoke of either the Iron Curtain. There's this trend with communism, wherever there's a lot of poverty and a lot of government failure, communism takes a hold so that the trains will run on time is the main quote. Anyway, so that is basically what happens. Sorry. And then there's the Berlin Crisis, which is in 1948 to May of 1949. And in 1948, 3 Western-controlled zones of Germany united and grew in prosperity due to the Marshall Plan. The West wanted the East to rejoin Stalin, who feared it would hurt the Soviet security. And in June of 1948, Stalin decided to gain control of West Berlin, which was deep inside the eastern sector. They cut road, rail, and canal links with West Berlin, hoping to starve it into submission. The West responded by airlifting supplies to allow the West Berlin to survive. This is called the Berlin Airlift. So remember, Germany is split up into 4 sectors. There's the United Kingdom sector, there's the Soviet Union sector, the American sector, and the French sector. And then we have Berlin, which has also separated into 4 sectors. And this is where we get the Berlin Wall. And in May of 1949, the USSR admitted defeat and lifted the blockade for supplies into Berlin. So then there's the establishment of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or what we call today, NATO. In 1949, the Western nations formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization to coordinate their defense against the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union. It originally consisted of America, Belgium, Britain, Canada, Denmark, France, Holland, Italy, Luxembourg, Norway, Portugal, and Portugal. Since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, some former Soviet republics have applied for membership to NATO. The Warsaw Pact was created by the Soviet Union to combat the NATO agreement. It was an organization of communist states in Central and Eastern Europe. It was established in May 14th of 1955 in Warsaw, Poland, and it established in response to the NATO treaty. The founding members was Albania, which left in 1961 as a result of the Sino-Soviet split, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and the Soviet Union, and then East Germany in 1956. Okay, so in the domestic front, Americans are afraid, it's called the Red Scare, right? So Americans are afraid that communists are going to take over the country, right? And so there's like this fear of communism, and then there's spies. And so there's all of these things that are happening on the domestic front. We also have other issues going on domestically, which we'll cover in the coming weeks. But to focus more politically for a moment, mainly Senator Joseph McCarthy, who lived from 1908 to 1957, led this crusade against the communists and spies. Now, I put that in quotes because it's very disputed. So McCarthy, a Republican senator from Wisconsin, did most to whip up anti-communism during the 1950s. On February 9th of 1950, he gave a speech claiming to have a list of over 205 communists in the State Department. No one in the press actually saw the names on the list, and McCarthy continued to repeat his groundless charges, changing the number from speech to speech. During this time, one state required pro wrestlers to take a loyalty oath before stepping into the ring. So he's more of like a fearmonger. And I'm not saying that Joseph McCarthy was all the way completely unfounded or wrong. I'm just saying that he was exaggerating, and it created a lot of fear in the country. In Indiana, a group of anti-communists indicted Robin Hood and its vaguely socialistic message that the book's hero had a right to rob from the rich and give to the poor, and forced librarians to pull the book from the shelves. Baseball, Cincinnati Reds renamed themselves the Redlegs. And that's Joseph McCarthy over there on the left. Okay, so McCarthy's downfall. In the spring of 1944, the tables turned on McCarthy when he charged that the Army had promoted a dentist accused of being a communist. For the first time, a television broadcast allowed the public to see the senator as a bolstering bully and his investigations as little more than a witch hunt. And on December of 1954, the Senate voted to censure him for his conduct and to strip him of his privileges as a United States senator. And he died 3 years later from alcoholism. The term McCarthyism lives on to describe anti-communist fervor, reckless accusations, and guilt by association. So this is kind of funny. Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible, was on the surface about the Salem witch trials, but its real target, though, was the hysterical persecution of innocent people during McCarthyism. So think about it. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. Daniel Day-Lewis's character is literally screaming in a pool, give me my life. Do not persecute me if you don't have proof. And that's actually the whole basis of the witch trials, right? So it's really fascinating, and that's when the Crucible's play came out. So the Cold War tensions increased in the U.S. when the USSR exploded its first atomic bomb in 1949. The Cold War tensions increased in the USSR when the U.S. exploded its first hydrogen bomb in 1952, and it was 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima atomic bomb detonated just like a couple years before that. So we also have this huge advancement in military power, and it just creates this huge arms race. So then we have the Korean War, which goes on for 3 years, 1950 to 1953, initiated by President Truman to contain the communist yoke in the Korean Peninsula. It began on June 25th of 1950 when North Korea invaded South Korea. And at first, no other countries were involved in this conflict. The United States became involved to help South Korea, who was a more democratic country than North Korea, still is today. And American troops drove North Korea troops to the Chinese border. Chinese troops then became involved, which were communist. And from 1950 to 1953, both sides fought battles. The war ended in an armistice, a peace treaty without a formal treaty. And the new border was essentially where the war had begun. They didn't, guys, listen. The Korean War changed absolutely nothing. It just killed a bunch of people. Over 3 million people died, but the border ended up didn't even change. So there's 3 important geographic lines. Mid-Korea. In 1945, Korea was divided at the 38th parallel. The Soviets controlled the north and the United States controlled the south. In September of 1950, the North Korean troops controlled the entire peninsula. And then in November of 1950, American and South Korean troops controlled the entire country. And then the war ended in 1953 at some point where the country was divided in 1945 and in 1950. So this is a map of the truce line in July of 1953, right here, the green. And then this is Seoul, the capital of South Korea. And this is Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. So North Korea lost over 600,000 civilians, 406,000 military, and 1.5 military wounded. South Korea lost 1 million citizens, 217,000 soldiers, and then they had 429,000 wounded. China lost over 600,000 military, and wounded was over 716,000. The U.S. lost 36,000 troops, and 103,000 were wounded. And then the UN helped out just a tiny bit. So the domino theory, and this is the, so the domino theory is like this. The Chinese Civil War ended in 1948 with a victory by the communists. So what does the domino theory argue? This is it's in Southeast Asia. So it's all of these countries in Southeast Asia. And the fear is is that when China was the domino, and all of these other countries are going to fall into communism, and the United States has to stop it. To put it in perspective, we tried to do that with 2 wars: Korea, Vietnam, and then Cambodia and Laos. And all of these conflicts, all of them, really, really hurt us as a country, both domestically and internationally. So that's the domino theory, that all of these dominoes will fall unless something stops them from doing so. And as of today, North Korea and South Korea are divided by a demilitarized zone at the border called the DMZ. Yeah, and every single day we hear something about North and South Korea, and it continues to be a hotbed today, and it's something that will probably be decided within our generation. Okay, so hold on 1 second here. Let me exit this. I want to take you on a little tour with Google Earth. So in Berlin, there's this Stalin builds the Berlin Wall, which basically segregated and blocked out different parts of Berlin so that the people would not see the other side, right? And that, you know, they could keep Eastern Germany more communist. So I wanted to zoom in on this memorial where they kept a portion of the Berlin Wall so that you could see it. So this is what the Berlin Wall looked like, and it literally just divided Berlin. I mean, literally. So this is part of the zone here. Let me see if I can zoom in right here and show you some more. Okay, yeah. So here's another portion of the Berlin Wall that is just preserved here. And it just, guys, it goes this whole direction. So if I just kind of drag along right here, it literally turns here, and it keeps going. It's insane. And it just went right through a city. So like imagine a wall just being built right through downtown Tulsa. It's the same idea. Like here's the line right here. You can still see portions of it that they've kept for a museum. It follows this street all the way down, even on next to those houses. Yeah. Okay. So I want to annotate on this world map for just a moment, give you some ideas of what we're going to be covering throughout the Cold War. So we have Bay of Pigs here. We have Vietnam, Cambodia here. We have Korea here. And we have Greece and Turkey here. These conflicts are what's going to define this age. And it's also going to affect us domestically increasingly until the fall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. So Vietnam and Korea, these two especially, will change our country domestically because of one word, the draft. And a lot of young people were really mad at the fact that they could be drafted into military service in a war that they didn't understand why it was being fought to begin with. We're going to get into that after Christmas. So not after Christmas. Sorry, that was stupid. But we're going to get into that. So until next time, have a good day and hope this lecture helps out.